When an earthquake shook the Italian lines in 1916, what happened next would decide the fate of an entire battle. This is not a metaphor. This is not a poetic description of artillery. This is geology intervening in human conflict. In the early morning hours of August 17, 1916, the earth itself rebelled along the Italian front, and in doing so, opened a door that had been sealed by months of futile bloodshed. What followed was a sequence of events so improbable that military historians still debate whether it was blind luck or something far stranger. To understand what the earthquake unleashed, we must first understand the gridlock that preceded it. By August 1916, the Italian Third Army, under the command of General Emanuele Filiberto, Duke of Aosta, had been hammering at Austrian positions on the Carso Plateau for nearly 2 months. This was the 6th Battle of the Isonzo, one of a series of brutal, attritional struggles that characterized warfare along this front. The objective was clear: break through to Trieste, Austria-Hungary's primary seaport. The reality was hellish. The Carso was a lunar landscape of limestone rock, riddled with caves that the Austrians converted into fortified positions. Temperatures routinely exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was scarce, and every meter of advance cost dozens of lives. The Italians had achieved a significant breakthrough earlier that month. On August 9th, they had finally captured Gorizia, a victory that electrified the Italian public and shook Austrian morale. But the road to Trieste remained blocked by a series of heavily fortified mountain positions: San Gabriele, San Marco, and the heights around Tolmino. Until these were taken, any advance on Trieste was strategically impossible. The Italian advance was deliberately slowed, paused, while these bastions remained in enemy hands. And so, by mid-August, the front had settled into a familiar pattern. Italian infantry launched assault after assault against Austrian machine guns emplaced in natural caverns. The Austrians, confident in their defensive positions, reportedly taunted their attackers. In one incident near Sant Grodo, when Italians offered an Austrian gun crew the chance to surrender, the defenders responded by flourishing a mandolin, mocking the Italians as mere musicians, not soldiers. The Italian infantry charged and bayoneted the entire crew. This was the nature of this war: intimate, personal, and utterly savage. But on the morning of August 17, 1916, something intervened that neither side could control. At approximately 6:00 a.m., a violent earthquake struck central Italy. The epicenter was near Rimini on the Adriatic coast, but the tremors radiated across dozens of cities and towns. In Rimini itself, 4 people were killed and 30 injured. The shaking caused widespread panic among civilian populations unaccustomed to such geological violence. But the earthquake's effects were not confined to the home front. Along the Isonzo front, hundreds of kilometers away, the shaking was felt. With equal intensity, the limestone caverns that had sheltered Austrian machine gunners for months suddenly became death traps. Rock slides thundered down mountainsides. Trenches collapsed. And in the chaos of those first few minutes, the carefully constructed Austrian defensive network began to unravel. The Austrians had spent months converting the Carso's natural caves into fortified positions. These were not simple holes in the ground. They were engineered strongpoints, equipped with heavy guns, ammunition stores, and communication lines. Some could house dozens of men. They were considered invulnerable to Italian artillery because they were. Shells exploded harmlessly against limestone, but earthquakes operate differently than artillery. They shake foundations. They fracture ceilings. They turn shelters into tombs. As the tremors continued, Austrian soldiers abandoned their cavern positions in panic or were buried alive inside them. By 7 a.m., the earthquake had subsided. But on the Italian side of the lines, officers realized they were facing an unprecedented opportunity and an impossible dilemma. The Austrian defenses had been shattered by nature, but the Italian army had been deliberately slowed, ordered to wait until the upper Isonzo positions were secured before advancing on Trieste. The command structure was rigid. Units were not positioned for an immediate exploitation, and no one had ever trained for a scenario where the enemy's invulnerable mountain forts collapsed into rubble. The window of opportunity was measured in hours, perhaps less. If the Italians hesitated, The Austrians would reorganize, reoccupy viable positions, and the moment would be lost forever. What happened next was not the result of grand strategy. It was the result of junior officers and frontline infantry making decisions in real time. Italian platoons, seeing the panic and destruction in Austrian lines, advanced without waiting for orders. They scrambled over terrain that had been impassable days earlier, now made navigable by the same rock slides that had destroyed Austrian positions. They reached the caves, and what they found inside defied imagination. Some caverns had completely collapsed, entombing entire Austrian gun crews. Others were partially destroyed, with survivors emerging dazed and unarmed, their weapons buried under tons of rock. The mandolin players of Santa Grotto were silent now. The exploitation was chaotic, uncoordinated, and absolutely essential. Italian infantry cleared position after position with minimal resistance. The Austrians, stripped of their prepared defenses and suffering from their own casualties, could not mount an effective counter. By nightfall on August 17th, the Italians had seized key terrain that had cost them thousands of lives in previous assaults. The straightening of the line that General Cadorna had demanded, that slow, deliberate process of securing the upper Isonzo before advancing on Trieste, had been accomplished in a single day, not by tactical genius, not by overwhelming artillery, but by the earth itself deciding to shift. The historical record from this period is frustratingly sparse. Contemporary newspapers noted the earthquake's civilian impact, the dead in Rimini, the injured, the homeless. They noted the ongoing military operations, the delays, the advances, the mountain fighting, but they did not, could not, fully capture the connection between these events. We know that in the weeks following August 17th, the Italian position on the Carso strengthened significantly. We know that the Austrian defensive line, so carefully constructed over months, never fully recovered its integrity in this sector. And we know that the path toward Trieste, while still obstructed, was now fractionally more open than it had been before the earth moved. Pause. Casualty figures from the earthquake itself are difficult to separate from combat losses. What is certain is that hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Austrian soldiers were killed or rendered combat ineffective by the tremors. The Italian units that exploited the breach suffered minimal losses in comparison to the bloody assaults that preceded and followed this moment. No medals were awarded for exploiting an earthquake. No official commendations mentioned geological intervention. The men who advanced on August 17th did so because they recognized an opportunity when they saw one, and because they were willing to act without waiting for permission.